touched on this subject before, and we're getting towards the Gon Adam, which Sam's been waiting for with bated breath. Anyway, Mishanigma Dinai. This is the beginning of this Mishnah. It goes right across to the next onward, but let's see what we've got. Mishanigma Dinai. Don't forget, everything depends on the verdict. And remember, we wait for the verdict. Once you've got the verdict, then off he goes, sadly, to Golus. Says the Mishnah, Mishenikma Dinai Meis Kohen Gadol. If after there's been, evening, a couple of others, I know that, Mishenikma Dinai Meis Kohen Gadol. After the Gemar Din, Meis Kohen Gadol, he dies immediately. Harizeh Eino Goyle. This individual does not go to Golus. Why? Because we've already got the death of the Kohen Gadol. So even though he hasn't been to Golus, you might have thought, well, if you haven't been to Golus, you can't have the death of the Kohen Gadol. The Mishnah says, yes, you can. It's all dependent on that death of the Kohen Gadol. And once, if he's died, once there's been a verdict, then we wait for the death of the Kohen Gadol, then he is freed. But we'll more about that in the Gemara. As Rashi says, Mafarish Tama Bigmara, from a Kal V'chomer. It will be a Kal V'chomer. We know about a Kal V'chomer. If the halacha A, which is more lenient, is like this, certainly B will be. But we'll come to that in a minute. Im ad shelo nigma dinoi meis Kohen Gadol. Before you've got the verdict, then the Kohen Gadol dies. So he dies, then you've got the verdict. Umonu, let's read that again. Im ad shelo nigma dinoi meis Kohen Gadol. Then, this is very important, the order that we got here. Umonu acher tato. Mono means they have appointed. Yeah, from a minion, moiner is count and also to appoint. So they appointed someone else, right? And then there is the verdict. Then you always look at the time of the verdict, the Kohen Gadol, who is actually been appointed, and in that role of the Kohen Gadol, then it's his death which is crucial. But more about that again. Look at the Rashi. The reasoning behind that will be learned in the Gemara. And what Rashi is saying here, don't try and work it out now because there will be a Gemara about it, and just move on for the moment. Now, what about? So we've seen two options there. There's one which is a standard, not even mentioned in this Mishnah, that you normally would wait until the death of the Kohen Gadol. So he said, if he dies immediately after the verdict, that's good enough. If he's died before the verdict, they've appointed someone else, then it's the second Kohen Gadol. What about this case? Nigma Dino, says the Mishnah, below Kohen Gadol. That's one case. Look at the Rashi. Nigma Dina below Kohen Gadol. Shalomino. So this is interesting. There's been a verdict without a Kohen Gadol. How could that be without a Kohen Gadol? Says Rashi, quite simply. Simon, we're just doing the Mishnah on Yud Aleph and looking at the Kohen Gadol's death, which is important. And then he is free and leaves Ori Miklot. What happens if there is no Kohen Gadol? Says Rashi, Shalom Minu Acher Tachtav, the last Rashi on the Mishnah, Yud Aleph on base. They haven't yet appointed the next person to take the place of the one who died. Then what? So I'll read the Rashi. Nigma dina b'roi Kohen Gadol. Shlominu acher tachtov ad shenigma dina, until you've got first the verdict. Shel zeh legolus. So you've got the verdict, but at that point there's no Kohen Gadol. The previous ones died. They haven't yet appointed, but there's been a verdict. That is one case, says, right, we haven't got the answer yet. What happens? So, Nigma Dina B'lo Kohen Gadol, one case. What about someone who kills a Kohen Gadol? Ooh. 2. 3. Kohen Gadol Shehorag. A Kohen Gadol himself, who is a Horeg. In all those examples, and we're talking about Horeg accidentally, says the Mishnah, Eino Yotzi Mishom La'olam. Ooh, there's no Kohen Gadol at the point of the Gemadin, point 1. 2, someone who kills a Kohen Gadol, you don't wait, even if there were to be another Kohen Gadol in place at the time of the verdict, that doesn't help. Or the Kohen Gadol himself, who kills accidentally. In those 3 instances, the individual who has killed accidentally will not leave Golus ever, and we'll see more about this as it's developed in the Gemara. Now, continues the Mishnah, can someone, we've said the individual leaves Golus at the death of the Kohen Gadol, is there anything else that he can leave Golus for? We're not talking about a birthday party, but what about something a little bit more serious? V'eina yoytzi lola edus mitzvah. Maybe, as we know, we've spoken about giving testimony for a particular mitzvah. Could be, let's say, remember we've spent a lot of time in Rosh Hashanah on Kiddush HaChodesh, or Kiddush, yeah? He saw the new moon. And normally if someone saw the new moon, they rush off. In fact, they're psukim to say even on Shabbos, he can jump into his car, get into a taxi, do whatever he likes to make sure he gets to the Beis Din. And this will be on Shabbos. So is he allowed to do that? Says this Mishnah, Eina Yotze lo la'edus mitzvah, and lo la'edus mamon. Not for a case, it could be a substantial amount of money, and he was a witness and he knows all about this, and he can put everything straight. I'm afraid he can't leave. For lo la'edus nefashos, building up, edus nefashos. He saw this event take place, could even be in Ori Miklot. Can he leave to give testimony? He can't. This is interesting. Now, this does need a limud from a posuk for this, because as we know, there's a general rule, pikuach nefesh is doche everything. Someone, sadly, who's unwell, Yom Kippur, everybody fasting on Yom Kippur, he would be exempt, pikuach nefesh, if the doctors say that he really shouldn't be eating, or anything else with pikuach nefesh. It overrides everything. Could be, so you've got to get the person off to hospital on Shabbos, so that's fine. Even I wouldn't say even a case of a lady giving birth, a woman giving birth, then as she's giving birth, there are lots of ways around that. Maybe you've got something all lined up or whatever, but if it really came to it, then of course you can be Machal Shabbos. So I would have thought if this man is the top advisor, the top general, says Rashi, and we're not talking about, politically, whether some people say he is and some people he isn't, we won't go down there, but where it's universally acclaimed that this individual is the Sar Tzavor, it doesn't matter. Says the Mishnah, Afilu Yisrael Tzrichim Lo, the whole of Yisrael needs him. Afilu Sar Tzavor Yisrael. He is the general of the army, and everybody agrees that he is the suitable man to do the job. And all those examples, I'm afraid, he is not allowed to leave, even though you'd say Pikuach Nefesh is Doka everything, not in this instance. Shenama, we've got a posuk. Asher Nos Shoma. He's got to flee to there. What's it flee with? All the psukim are talking about Ori Miklot. Obviously, that's where he's fleeing, and you've got these extra words. He's got to flee to there. That too there says that's exactly where this individual is killed accidentally, has to stay there. Shom Tehei Di Rosai. That's where his place of residence has to be. And if he dies before the Kohen Gadol, what would happen then? Shom Tehei Misosai. That would be his place where he might die, unless the Kohen Gadol died predeceased him. Shom Tehei Kuvurosa. Wow. If he died and the Kohen Gadol is still there, then not only would his place where he'd die would be in the Orei Miklot, he'd have to be buried there too. He cannot leave. And that's all learned from Asher Nos Shoma to there. That is the place he's got to remain and stay. Okay. Further, I mean, this again will be developed.
Is there any reason why Yoav Ben's story is particularly picked out? I mean, the concern only starts for Yoav.
Could be
special.
Those people familiar with Tanakh may say most famous Yoav Ben Tzruya.
Most famous general, you mean?
Yeah, famous general. Yeah, absolutely. Could have had someone else here. If you think of anybody, Montgomery, maybe you say, or
Joshua. You're sure Joshua could have.
Yeah, but he's not considered a general. But you're right.
Yeah.
Well, no, I think we're trying to say, everybody. You're right. He's a leader, but the same thing would apply if it would be Yeshua or anybody else. If it's accidental, then he's got to remain there. That's
why the Mishnah just singled him out.
Yeah, but I think he's a well-known general of Klal Yisrael. Yep, good point. Now a further halacha. Just got a few halachas here. The Mishnah is reckoning out things that, again, we'll have to work out where they learn this from. There's another rule. As we know, there's what's called the boundaries. You've got the boundaries of a city, and then you've got extra 2,000 amos. That's called the extension. That's still considered part and parcel of the city. So you've got the boundaries around the city, and there's always an extra 2,000 amos that we talk about, the techum around a city. When you talk about Shabbos, where you can walk not just to the end of the village, you've got an extra 2,000 amos. That's considered secondary, but part of that city. And it's interesting, as we'll see, Kashem Shehoir Koletes, just like the city that they've been appointed. Remember the 42 cities plus the 6. You've got the main and the secondary cities. Just like the city acts as a place of refuge, kach techumo kolet, so does the extension, the 2,000 amos. So we'd have to know where that went up to, and so that he's got that extra area that he can spend his time and go. Normally at the end of a city, you often find that they were at the edge of the city. They could have had orchards and general green land. So there is that extra land. So that is also part of the city, and therefore he would be allowed to go and spend his time up to there, and even perhaps I had property right over there. But no, normally you see the way you do the city, as talks about Erevin, is you would take all the houses into account, encircle them, or perhaps use a square going around that city, and then you'd extend. So the area which would be out in the Tchum would normally be an area where there wouldn't be any houses. As well, that might be part and parcel of the city itself. Whatever it is, you've got that extra area for the Rotzeach. Now, this is the bit we were going to have to spend some time on in due course, but not today. Rotzeach sheyotzo chutz l'tchum. Rotzeach goes out of the Tchum, taking his chance outside the Tchum. U'metzot hadom, and the Goel Adom, the nearest relative, finds him. And as we said before, part of it's not that it's like a Hefkevelt and it's just given over. The rule is that it's the Goel Adom who can kill him. That is the rule. It's not kind of say like, anybody can, it's a free for all for anyone to do what they like. The rule actually is this individual who killed accidentally with some part, we said, negligence, not totally without any negligence. The rule is that he can be killed by this individual. So it's very specific. It's not, as I say, a free for all, and you can do whatever you like here. That is the rule, because we want him, as I say, to. We spoke about the rehabilitation and the concern he had about life. Why? Because there was this negligence. So the rule is that the Goel Adom can kill him. Only the Goel Adom, nobody else. Now, if he does step outside the Tchum, the area of the city where he's gone, which is one of the Ori Miklot, and the Goel Adom finds him, we've got a machlokas between Rabbi Yossi Aglili and Rabbi Akiva. Rabbi Yossi Aglili says, mitzvah biyad Goel Adom. It's a mitzvah that the Goel Adom has to kill him, right? So in other words, this individual has been, the ruling of him has been passed over to the Goel Adom. He's forcing this individual to stay in this city. If he comes out, there is a mitzvah to kill him, just like it would be if it would have been more than just, as we're saying here, a shogi. If it will be mazid, then there will be a mitzvah on the courts to kill this individual. A murderer, intentionally, where we've been through all the rules and he knew exactly what he was doing and he was warned, don't do it, but nevertheless he still pulled the trigger. It was b'mazid. There's a mitzvah on the Bezdin. He has to be killed. It's true, we will do as much as we can to try and find a way out. In other words, maybe he didn't really understand what he was doing or whatever. Fine, but if all that's happened and you've been down that way, and say the Bezdin then has decided, no, this really was, then there's a mitzvah on the court. Here as well, there will be a mitzvah on this individual, on the Goel Adom, to kill him if he comes out. And if he sees him, so it works both ways. It's keeping him in the Ori Miklot, and again, the mitzvah on the Goel Adom to do this. But also, this is interesting. Reshus biad kol adam. Anyone else can, and that is the halacha. The halacha saying, if you want to, you can kill him. It's not like say a hefker. It's a ruling saying he should remain. You'd say in jail. He should remain in this city. That's the rule.
Isn't this? I mean, I hear all of this, but isn't it a recipe for sort of mayhem? I mean, vigilantes going out killing. Anybody's got the right to go kill.
No.
What if people make a mistake in identification? I mean, no one's policing this.
They'll end up in the same place.
But this is setting up a system which is
not
highly
really.
precarious.
Not really. It's reshus. It doesn't say the mitzvah on everybody in the country. There's one individual who has this. That's only Rabbi Yossi Aglili. We actually paskin like Rabbi Akiva's. We'll see in a minute. So one individual has the mitzvah. Anybody else can if they want to, but they don't have to. Again, this can would sound more like beware. You wrote Sayach, because you're in real trouble. Anybody could kill you, but only could. And that's really keeping him, ensuring he remains in this Ori Miklot. That's all we're saying. But that's the view of Rabbi Aglili. Rabbi Akiva says, no. Even the Goel Adom, it's only Reshus b'yad Goel Adom. He can, if he wants to. And that's why, as we mentioned before, the point about the Chachomim explaining to the Goel Adom really, let him off, and etc. Because it's only Reshus. But look at the last part of the Mishnah. V'chol Odom Chayovim Olav. Anybody else? This you'll be quite happy with this, Sam. Obviously, following the view of Rabbi Akiva, that it's only a Reshus for the Goel Adom, and he can forego that too. But anybody else, Chayovim Olov. What does it mean, Chayovim Olov? Chayovim Olov means they would be guilty for killing him. They are not allowed to kill him. But more about that, because there is the Vilna Gaon's got a different girsa here, according to Mashal. But the girsa, the text we've got is B'chol Odom Chayovim Olov, means they would be guilty for killing him. They have no right to kill him. Just the Goel Adon, that nearest individual, can, if he wants to, he can. But still, I say it's not. So according to this, there's no mitzvah at all. And it's interesting. It's based on how you learn one word that we'll come across in Yud Beis Omid Aleph. This word Verotzach. The Goel Adon. Either Verotzach means he can kill him or he must kill him. But more about that in due course. Yud Beis Omid Aleph.
But just if I may, just one more comment, because
go for it.
I'm just struggling with this. I mean, as a system, you're putting the execution of justice, literally an execution in this case, in the hands of a related party who's highly emotionally charged in the whole matter, who's being asked to perform dinei nefashos, which would normally be in the hands of Hashem or of a court and of a system.
It is the court.
And my concern, sorry, just to finish the question.
Yeah, go on. Yeah.
My concern is a mistaken identity. He's doing it in an emotional state. He's making a mistake. What if they're twins? How does he identify the person that he's meant to kill? When he makes a mistake, is it a shogeg or is it a mason? If he ends up killing the wrong person,
again, he'll be in the same boat as the person he's killed. He'll have to go to Golos himself, or maybe not, or maybe we'll say it's worse. Now, according to Rabbi Akiva, what we're saying is, if he wants to, he has the right to, because that's ensuring that this Retzach will remain in the Ori Mikla. Otherwise, he just would wander in there. It's a joke. This will mean we're saying it's only a right. He could forego it, but it will keep that goel. It will keep the Retzach in the Ori Mikla. No one else has that right, according to Rabbi Akiva, how we paskin. But there's someone who could. If he would kill him, again, he'd have to be certain what he's doing. You're right, emotionally charged, but he could if he wanted to. But he's got to make sure it's the right man. If it's not, then again, he would be chayav misa. You're quite right. If he knows for sure and he's just making it, and we know that he's got the wrong man, and he knows that too, then he will be chayav. It's only when he knows for certain he's got the right to be able to, but doesn't have to carry it out. And that is the ruling to ensure that the Grotzach will stay in this place of Ori Miklot, where it's the whole idea is to, as we explained before, this rehabilitation and the feeling, because after all, he's killed and he's not, guiltless. It's not without guilt at all, because there was some negligence, and therefore we want him to feel for the family that's lost this individual. And it's part of the kapara. So let's see how.
Just one other clarification: is there any description or any stipulation as to the means of this execution? I mean, executioners are professionals where death sentences are carried out by a court system. I mean, this is just a lay member of the community. I mean, can the execution be carried out with torture? I mean, does it have to be done instantly, like kashrus? I mean, it's just kind of an open license to go and kill someone. Admittedly, it's killing a murderer, but in what fashion, in what way, how do you carry out that execution? It seems to be so open to potential pitfalls.
Good point. You'd have to say there would be the point of this Rachmanus coming in. So yes, he'd be allowed to kill him, you say, instantly as he could, but it's only a reshus. He could, and you would have thought in most instances, it's not something that he's going to do. I can't tell you whether this was ever carried out. The Goel Adom, you would have thought the Goel Adom again, because of the Rachman. Once he knows he's a Goel Adom, then you would have thought other individuals would be saying to him, the rabbis, etc., that don't utilize that. But that this way, at least we will keep the Retzach inside. We've said before this idea of even a Bezdin, a court. We've said if they are killing too frequently, that's a cruel Bezdin. And they were saying the same thing here. We're giving in that opportunity, and sometimes that alone will, as you say, emotionally charged, will calm down this individual. Yeah, you've got the opportunity, and it is really his fault and everything else, but don't do it. And that, it's, as I say, should calm him down, knowing that he could if he wanted to. He's got the capability of, but not using it may actually calm him down. So, but these are good points. But particularly as we pass on Rabbi Akiva, it would be extremely rare, and we'd be saying rishus. As it's not a mitzvah, it's rishus. You'd say if you're prepared to forego that itself is a wonderful aliyah for the person who was killed, and the schar for that and everything else. The rachmanas that you're doing as well is wonderful. And that's what it's all about, to try and train everybody. Yes, this person could do this, so he hopefully calmed down, but by not doing it, that is a wonderful act of chesed, and the Torah is full of these acts of chesed. So again, here as well, by foregoing it, you're doing this act of chesed, and no doubt the great sages and others would be homing in on that point when they talk to this Goel Adon. Okay? Now, first of all, we need to know the Ma'atama, says the Gemara. Wherever we got a Ma'atama.
Can I start something, just a separate issue?
Yes.
Is that just for Eruv? Do you have other laws of practice? Something to do with property as well?
What are you talking? Are you talking about the Tchum?
Yeah. Well, I'm just saying. What is it? What dinim is it applicable? One is the for Eruv.
No, you're right. Here it's applicable for going out for the miklot.
No, I'm saying for what? Yeah, but they're using.
I might have thought that the rule. Interesting, good point. Like you talk about a city where what is considered the boundaries of the city. How far could you walk on Shabbos? There's a rule how far outside the city. The city includes also a Tchum. That's the point. You do find this in the Torah as well, where you talk about the cities of the Leviim, and that's what these were. They had extra area, an area normally which was not built up, and some of it was used for agricultural purposes. Others were just like a green area. So that's all considered part and parcel of the city, albeit. So you're right. We're thinking quite a lot. You say about an Eruv idea when you want to extend the town. You're quite right. The same thing here. We're using this ruling for what is considered the Ir Miklot. So just like we'd find it in the case of walking outside the city on Shabbos, you've got this rule of 2,000 amas, etc., which we might follow up. But so the rule here we're applying is that the city is not just the city; it's the outskirts of the city. You'd probably say that's the wording you want to use, which is very helpful. Which means it doesn't mean to say he's locked up in this house all the time. Even if it's a small village, he does get this extra area where he can spend his time, leisure time, out there as well. So that's what this mission is telling us. You're quite right. We find this with the general Eruvin, but here it's just telling us the city does not just mean the city; it's the outskirts of the city too, which is the extra 2,000 amas. But the Gemara, said the Gemara Ma'atama. What's the reason? Now, what's it mean? What's the reason of what? Well, it goes back to the beginning of the Mishnah. We said if the court case, the verdict's been given, and then the Kohen Gadol dies. He didn't even get to Ori Miklot. Then the Mishnah says he doesn't need to go to Ori Miklot. The kapara of this Kohen Gadol, this pious Kohen Gadol, meant to be, that itself will act as a kapara for him. And hopefully people will be learning lessons about the Kohen Gadol, and therefore at his death, that would act as a kapara for him to not go to Golus because the Kohen Gadol has died. Now, the Gemara starts off with an interesting kal v'chomer. Omar Abaya, what's the reason for it? He hasn't set foot in the Orei Miklot. So why does he go free? If the Mishnah would have said, if he's got to Orei Miklot and spent X amount of time, then the Kohen Gadol dies, I can understand it. But he hasn't got to Orei Miklot at all. Says the Gemara, Omar Abaya, kal v'chomer. A kal v'chomer means we're learning from A to B. What does it mean? Uma mishe golo kva, someone who is in Golus, Yotzo, leaves Golus, Achshov. Once someone is in the Orei Miklot, the Kohen Gadol dies, he then can leave Orei Miklot, right? He's got into Orei Miklot, then leaves. Mishelo Gola, someone who hasn't yet gone to Golus, Eino Din Shelo Yigle. Isn't it a kal v'chomer that he doesn't need to go to Golus? If somebody already, if they're in Golus, they're freed. That's quite something to free somebody and say they can leave. Someone who never got to Golus and then the Kohen Gadol dies doesn't need to go through the motions of going to Golus and coming out again. That's the kal v'chomer the Gemara's learning. Okay? Tricky one, because the Gemara says, look, immediately, the Dilma maybe Hai de Gola Ichpale. No, this is not. What do you mean the kal? How does this kal v'chomer work anyway? Someone who's gone into Orei Miklot, if the Kohen Gadol dies, he leaves. This person who never even got to Orei Miklot certainly doesn't need to go to Orei Miklot. Says, what do you mean? Maybe the whole point is once you've got to Orei Miklot, this is part of the kapara. You had to leave home and you had to go elsewhere. Maybe that's the kapara. Hide lo gola, lo, maybe not. Lo mide golus komachap. Oh, 1 minute, we'll get to that in a minute. Let's read this again. The Dilma, perhaps, hide the gola ichpale. Hide lo gola loy, comma. With me? In other words, this is not a kal v'chomer. Because maybe the whole point is you've got to get to Golus. This individual hasn't got to Golus. So the fact that you've got a verdict, the Kohen Gadol dies, you never got to Orei Miklot, in which case you can't just be scot-free. Answers the Gemara, Mide Golus koma chapra. Is it just the Golus is machape? It's not that at all. In some way it does, but ultimately it's the Misas Kohen hu de Machapro. We spoke before about this idea of the Kohen Gadol in some way. He should have acted. Remember, it's really coming from the Kohen Gadol. We're saying in his capacity of Kohen Gadol, and just looking at the stature of the Kohen Gadol, everything he's been doing, it should have meant that people took life more seriously. I don't mean life general, I mean not killing individuals, concern for other people. And therefore we're saying it's the Kohen Gadol. If that message didn't come across, then it's his death which would then relieve this individual from going to Golus. So again, what we're saying is the kapara comes from the Kohen Gadol's death. And therefore, whenever that were to happen, it's not going to, it's true, he's got to go to Golus, but the kapara comes from the death of the Kohen Gadol. That's what we're saying. And therefore, the ruling is this.
Are we also saying that it's the time spent there, though, for the Rotzer? I mean, it's clearly...
Well, no, that's what we're not... you're right. He should be
There's a
spent.
rehab. There's a rehabilitation.
You're right, but ultimately, that's exactly what the Gemara's backwards and forwards here. The Gemara is suggesting the question. That's the Dilma. The Gemara is saying no, he hasn't had the time, the rehabilitation. The Gemara is saying ultimately that's true. We'd like to have that rehabilitation, but if you got the death of the Kohen Gadol, that itself would act as a kapara. That's what we're saying here, and therefore that would be sufficient, even though he hasn't got to Golus and hasn't had that rehabilitation. It doesn't matter because he's got the kapara from the death of the Kohen Gadol. So
you could argue then. I mean, the way you read the Pesukim is that he's exiled to the Ori Miklot to stay there, and it's the death of the Kohen which gives the parameters of the length of his sentence.
Yes,
it's not clear from the wording of in the Torah.
No, you're very, very good. You're quite right.
But and you could argue that that if it's only due to the death of the Kohen Gadol, perhaps he could stay at home or wait till the guy dies. I mean, if that's what the kapara, if that's what the deciding factor is. But
you're right. We want him to be in Ori Miklot,
which is Ir Halvim as well. That's the other point. They were Ori Halvim, so there was
yes, it is Ori Halvim. So it's worked out in Shemaim, if you like, the amount of rehabilitation he needs. It's the time of he has to remain until the death of the Kohen Gadol. So I think that's what you were saying. That might be naught. Maybe he doesn't need that amount of rehabilitation. He's got the kapara of the Kohen Gadol, and therefore doesn't need any more. He's got that kapara from the death of the Kohen Gadol. And I suppose what we're saying is the death of a Kohen Gadol was that important and meant so much that itself would act as a kapara for him. So yeah, as you say, it's not the going to Golus. We keep making, you're right, correctly talking about the rehabilitation. If the Kohen Gadol has died, then this individual doesn't need. That's what we're saying. He's had a kapara. We've got the death of the Kohen Gadol. This individual was saying, according to the calculations above, doesn't need any rehabilitation. You've got the death of the Kohen Gadol. Now, of course, it would depend how long he's staying there on the death of the Kohen Gadol. So you can imagine, whether it's not an early, how old the Kohen Gadol is would also have a bearing on this. But this is all part of the overall calculations, that how much of a rehabilitation does the individual need? And what we're saying here is this person doesn't need anything at all. He's got it by the death of the Kohen Gadol, and that's all that's needed. Okay, tricky. Now, what about this one? Im ad shelo nigmar dino. That's the second case. This is trickier, as we'll see. Until im ad shelo nigmar dino. What happened? Then the Kohen Gadol dies, and then they appointed another one in his place. Then we said he waits for the death of the second. Now look at the Gemara here. Im ad shelo nigmar dinoi menor hani mili. Where'd you get that from? Why isn't it the death of the first Kohen Gadol? When the act took place, we're always looking at the act of this murder, albeit it was unintentional. But why are you focusing on the second one? Surely it should be the death of the Kohen Gadol at the time of the Ritzicha, the murder. So if he's not there, so again, you'd think that this individual doesn't need to go to Golus, just like we said before. If you've got a verdict and then the Kohen Gadol dies, that's sufficient. Why shouldn't it take that back in time and say if he dies any time after the murder has been committed, then even if the Bezdin says he was Chayav Gol, well, he won't need to go to Golus. Let's have a look at this. Omar Rav Kahana, the Omar Kro, V'yoshav bo admos hakohen hagodol. The pasuk that we've seen before, and he stays there. V'yoshav bo, he stays, lives there. Ad mos hakohen hagodol. Now this is the crucial point. Asher moshach oisoi b'shemen hakodesh. Maybe we should look at this pasuk. Have you got a minute, Peter? Bamidbar 35:25. Can we have that up, please? Bamidbar 35. Oh, well done there. He's protected or saved from him. He goes back to the Ori Miklat. Remember, you've had the court case. He's brought back to the Ori Miklat. The Yoshav bo, and lives there. Ad mos hakohen hagodol. That will be sufficient. There's an extra few words at the end of this pasuk. Asher moshach oso b'shemen hakodesh. He anointed him b'shemen hakodesh. Now the translation here just says, who was anointed with the sacred oil. That's nice, but let's look at the words literally. Asher moshach oso, he anointed him. Who's anointing who here? Let's go back to Yoshav. Yoshav bo, he is to remain there, live there in this city, until the death of the Kohen Gadol, Asher moshach oso, he anointed him. Doesn't talk about the Bezdin anointing him. Until that, it was a plural. Who's the moshach oso? If the pasuk would have said Admos hakohen hagadol asher nimshach, who was anointed, it says Asher moshach oso, he anointed him. What are we talking about? What does this pasuk mean? Thank you, Peter. Let's go back.
Sorry, why does it matter who anointed whom?
Yeah, but no, you're right. Why does it matter? So very good. What does the apostle? What are those words coming to tell us? Exactly your point. What do you mean? Who anointed, and who does it mean anyway? And the apostle if you translate it literally, as you would have to, let's say, if you were doing your biblical Hebrew O level or A level, or now it's called whatever it's, yeah. How would you translate those words? Asher moshach oso, he anointed him. And as you say, Simon, what does it matter who anointed him? But even without that, what does apostle mean? Who's anointing whom? I've only got two he's in this pasuk. Either it's the person who killed accidentally, or the Kohen Gadol. There are two individuals mentioned in that pasuk, and then it says he anointed him. Who's anointing whom here? And as you say, Simon, what difference does it make anyway? Have a look at the pasuk. Hashem omer v'chihu Moshe. Did this Rotseach anoint him? There are only two individuals mentioned in the pasuk, in the singular, the Kohen Gadol and the Rotseach. And then it says he anointed him. Well, the only way you can understand that is that the Rotseach anointed him. The Rotseach did the anointing? Since when is the Rotseach the one who's going to anoint the new Kohen Gadol? V'chihu Moshe elo ze shenimshach biyod. That's what the pasuk's telling us. Hashem moshach oso means not that he anointed, that it was in his time. Shenimshach biyomov, he was anointed not by him, but in the time. Yeah, that he's the verdict's given. That's what we're saying. So if the verdict's given and there's a new man, that's what we're saying here. The Rotseach, he's only a Rotseach when the Bezdin says he is a Rotzeach accidentally, could be completely free. So we're saying he is the one who anointed. Doesn't mean literally he anointed him, but he was anointed during the time when the verdict's given, or at that time when the verdict's given. That's how we're learning the posuk here. Have a look at Rashi here. Shenimshach biyomov mishenase ze roteach. When this individual's a roteach, he was anointed. Yeah. So what we're saying is, it's the Kohen Gadol who's been anointed, who's anointed at the time when the verdict is given. Yeah. So this individual, it's true, he didn't literally anoint him, but he is saying, the posuk saying, it's the Kohen Gadol who's in that position of the Kahuna Gedolah at the time when this Rotzeach has been, when the verdict's come there, accused of being Rotzeach. Now, that's the posuk. Says the Gemara, my hava le b'mevet. Now, we had this tricky piece before. We explained why the Kohen Gadol in some way was responsible for this. Under his tenure, he should have made sure that everyone realized the importance of life, and therefore this type of negligence shouldn't be happening. That is the job of the Kohen Gadol. He should be acting as this role model together with the prayers of the Kohen Gadol, of the Yom Kippur. It should be so effective on individuals that people should feel more for other individuals, and therefore this type of negligence shouldn't occur. Obviously, an onus, things which are totally out of someone's capability, or not just capability, it's just out of their area, as we said before, an onus where, the car that is a faulty car and he didn't know anything about it and they couldn't check it, or maybe he did even check it, things which are totally out of his control, that's an onus in it anyway. He doesn't go to Golus. What we're saying here is, if there are cases happening of this type of negligence, where he could have been a bit more careful, he should have been more careful, and that is very much the responsibility of the Kohen Gadol to ensure that, together with his prayers and together acting in this role model that he's meant to be, that people are taking more care of life. Now, that's all very well. At the time of the murder, you can say this murder accidentally happened not because, but it was in the time of the Kohen Gadol. Now, we're not saying that. We're saying it's the time when the verdict's given. So you could have this, at the time of the murder, there was a Kohen Gadol A, he then passes away. Then you've got a verdict, and you've got the second Kohen Gadol. Yeah? So a second Kohen Gadol was appointed, and then you've got the verdict. And we say now he's got to wait for the death of the second Kohen Gadol. Yeah? Michael wants to say something? Hold on a minute. So what we're saying is, it's the second Kohen Gadol he's got to wait for, the death of the second Kohen Gadol. And as we said before, the Kohen Gadol is, some guilt is with the Kohen Gadol. He needs a kapara because he hasn't completely fulfilled his job together with his tefillos and role model. But this second man was not at the Kohen Gadol at the time of the murder. So what's he got to do with the second Kohen Gadol? Do you understand? You've got a first Kohen Gadol at the time of the murder. He's already passed away. Now you've got a second Kohen Gadol been appointed, and then you've got the verdict, and we say you've got to wait until the second Kohen Gadol dies. What's it got to do with the second Kohen Gadol? Strong question. My hava le lemevet. Very tricky, and perhaps a tricky answer here. Says the Gemara, Hoyo lo levakesh rachamim. He should have pleaded, asking for mercy. Seems min hashomayim. Sheyigomer dinoi lezchus. That this individual, the verdict should have been that it was not negligent in any way, but it was an onus. Below Bikesh, she didn't do that. What does that mean? You can't pray for something which is incorrect. I mean, this person has committed this offense. What does this Gemara mean? Very tricky Gemara here.
This whole situation is so complex because I can't think of any other instance where you've got this very odd collision of what we call divine justice with human justice, the intersection of the two constantly colliding with each other. What looks like happenstance isn't. That he died just in time, so he avoided Golos. The offense was done. So everything is divine justice. But here it's also saying even more than that.
This one is really tricky. And then before she asked, how can he daven and pray that he should have got off free? Well, I mean, the fellow committed an offense. And as
it
we
only
said
makes
before,
sense if somehow the Bestin got it wrong. And this is again divine intervention to correct it. But even that is troublesome.
The Bezdin made a mistake here. Without his intervention, what should he have done? It's very tricky. Very tricky. They ask, what does it mean? A possible way is the following. What would happen when it says Lavakesh Rachamim? As we explained before, and we said there's a very thin line between this onus, totally out of his domain, or something which is slightly negligent. Because if it's gross negligent, we're not talking about that. That's not a Golos case anyway. So the Golos case is between onus, totally out of his control, and slight negligence, right? We've also said we want this individual to feel for other individuals, right? We want him, and part of the rehabilitation, how we are learning this, is this individual has to go through some type of process. Yes, it's a kapara of the Kohen Gadol, but that's all worked out. Let's just focus on, we want him to feel remorse for what he's done. This second Kohen Gadol now in place. There's a case that happened where this individual, there's someone else who's a Rotzeach. The job of the Kohen Gadol would be to come, you'd expect, to visit this individual at the moment he's in the Bezdin, so there's a court case going to be taking place, and the case is this an onus? Is this negligent? In between. If it is this negligence that we're talking about, he'll have to go to Golos. This Kohen Gadol, should have the capacity, and there are cases like this, where these great and pious individuals, someone who's done something wrong, they're with them. They don't even have to talk to them. But the fact that there's this feeling of this pious person who's looking and perhaps feeling for the other individual, that itself should help this rehabilitation of this other individual. And you can imagine he's saying, I would pray for you. What do you mean pray for you? I would pray before the court case, If you really do have remorse, and it's up to me to be able to get that across to you with my words, or maybe just my feelings, maybe my tears of what you've done. If you really feel sorry for what you've done, and it's my job to make you feel that way, the job of the Kohen Gadol, I will be praying for you what? That you're going to, as we said before, it's up to the Beis Din to decide, is it in the onus category or is it slightly negligent? I will pray that they will decide, and this is the point, because of your remorse, they will come up amongst the court, maybe they won't be certain or whatever, because you've got now that rehabilitation, that the court will decide that you are an onus only if you really do have that remorse. It's up to me, the Kohen Gadol, to get that across to you. If you really do have that remorse, then I do have the power, I'm going to pray, that they will decide, and that's because you've got the remorse, that they're going to tilt this towards the onus category, and you will go, then you will be free. But it's only if you are sincere, and it's only if I've done my job properly as this Kohen Gadol role, the role of the Kohen Gadol. I'm talking to you. I'm trying to get this across to you. You've got an opportunity here. So it's like a third opportunity. I will pray for you. Pray for you mean not that they'll make a mistake, but they will say, well, you didn't really understand it. Really, it's not quite negligent. It's slightly less. Because of the remorse that you've got, I've got that capability of a Kohen Gadol, but it's my job to be able to get that across to you. If I can't get that across to you, then I've failed. And therefore, I've failed in my job as a Kohen Gadol, because my Kohen, it's not just, an employment being a Kohen Gadol and the salary that you receive. The Kohen Gadol's job is very specific. He's looking after the welfare of the individuals and their level of concern for other people too. And my job is to get that across to you. I'm by pleading with you. Imagine this in the jail before the court case. If you really do have this remorse and you really are concerned for other people, then there's a possibility, and I'm going to try my best with my tefillos, etc., to tilt that it should be considered an onus. And therefore, in some way, if I didn't get that across to you, it means I have not fulfilled my job as a Kohen Gadol. My job as a Kohen Gadol is to try and get that point across to you. And therefore, if the court case said that you were negligent and they couldn't find any reason to say, well, you didn't really understand what you were doing, then it really was just across that barrier to onus, it means I haven't got across to you the point that you have the remorse which is sufficient to be able to do that, and therefore the Kohen Gadol is guilty in some way. It's very tricky.
It's almost like a presidential pardon, right? After the fact, right?
Yes, but it's because I'm getting the remorse for. So it's more than a presidential pardon. It's a pardon because the chap's really guilty, not like other cases we've heard about, and we won't go down there. But you got a presidential pardon where they're still absolutely guilty and they're only too pleased and they've got all that money and great, off they go. This is not like that at all. It's a pardon for you because you've got that rehabilitation already. And the way it will be found that you've got that rehabilitation is if they decide, it could be on a technicality, that it really didn't go across. It's tricky, very tricky. But that's what I can see here in these words. Levakish rachamin zevelo bikesh. He didn't manage to be mavakish sufficiently to get that moved across. What does that mean? It means that the individual didn't have that. He needs that rehabilitation to stay in Beis Din, to stay in Ori Miklot. until he learns that lesson. It wasn't good enough, but he is responsible in some way. He should have got that message across to him. Yeah, Michael, I think you had a question there, or can't hear you.
So, sorry, it was probably my fat fingers.
Okay, well, thank you very much. It's nice to chat to you anyway.
Indeed, likewise.
So yeah, it's a tricky piece, but it's interesting because whatever happens, whatever reason you come up with, there is a posture to say that has to happen. The Gemara is looking for a reason behind it. Now, whether we understand it or not, there is a posture which says that it's Asher Nimshach. You look at the Kohen Gadol who is sitting on that throne of Kohen Gedolah, if you like. And that's why you've got those words we said before, Simon. Hashem Moshach, he, if you like, is anointed him. Not literally. It's during his time. Now that we're coming to this verdict, he anointed him after the... It doesn't literally anoint him, of course he didn't. But it means he has, during his time post this murder, the anointing has taken place. So it's as if he's anointed him, but it means during that time he was anointed. That's what's crucial here. It's got to be at the time of the verdict who was anointed, if you like, by this murderer, which means who was the Kohen Gadol, who was the on the throne of the Kohen Gedolah. That is the one that you look at. The Gemara is trying to come up with a reason why should that second Kohen Gadol be guilty in any way? Because we explained before, remember, where it's you've got to wait till the death of the Kohen Gadol because in some way there's something to do with this Kohen Gadol. And the way you can see from this Gemara is there's a job that's got to be done by this Kohen Gadol. And if it doesn't come through, it means he has not fulfilled his job of getting the sufficient remorse from this murderer, which would have meant, therefore, he would have been free. So we've now found another way of not going to Golos, because that's what it's all about. And I know we use this word rehabilitation. That's what we want from this murderer. And you could get it just by spending time, the Kohen Gadol spending time. Look, this is your last chance, he's telling him. You're going to have a verdict soon. And if you really feel for the other individuals, and I don't know that, you know that, Hashem knows that. If you really have, I'm going to pray for you that this is going to move the verdict. And it can have that effect because, after all, we're just looking for the rehabilitation. He would have got that rehabilitation, and therefore I have not fulfilled my job sufficiently. Now, if you come up, there are several other answers, trickier still on this Gemara. It's, I say, a difficult couple of words, but that's what I'm putting out. So it's a powerful message altogether, this idea of acting as a role model, and whether we like it or not, we're all in that position, whether it's in our families, if we're outside the home, anything else. Just acting as in the name Jewish means we've got this role. And we really do have to fulfill it. We're expected to be on a different level. As you can see, what's expected from every individual, what's expected from the Israeli army, it's different to everybody else. Because that's where we are, and wherever we are, we've got to make sure that we fulfill this role. Everyone in their own particular area, but we're all acting this Kohen Gadol on the highest echelons. That's rather different. But every person within their own, you'd say, I wouldn't say English, in your own Daled Amos, has that possibility of acting as a role model and to try and get people to move onwards and upwards. And that's our role that we take, each and every one of us. So with that, gentlemen, I do wish you well. We've gone well above time, but past my bedtime, here at 11:15, but that's okay. Not quite. So with that, gentlemen, I wish you well. Good to see you very much, Peter. We didn't speak, but you're well. How in a word or two?
Just say how lovely it is to be back with you again.
Yeah, missed last week, but you're well.
I'm well, and I had a week of my life just disappeared completely while I was in the Royal Free. Thank God I'm out of it now.
Yeah, very good indeed. And you're still waiting, of course, for the
I'm still waiting for my hip operation.
the hip, but that will be a bit later, will it?
Probably another 2 or 3 months.
Okay, but no, it's good to see you. Looking well. Kanana horror, as they say.
Thank you, Norman.
Emid Hashem, go Mechail Choil, and
Shlema.
Yeah,
Thank you.
Before Shalem, indeed. If we can, for Tehillim Kuf Chof Aleph, and we'll go from there. Shiur Lamalois.
Eso enel hectorim bein yovo Ezri mein Adonai osei shomayim v'yoretz Atein lamot raglecho al yonu shomerecho Hinei Elohim v'lo yishon shomer Yisrael Adonai shomerecha Adonai tzitzum al yad yemenecho Yom Hashem eslo yarecho v'yorecho Adonai yishmerecho mikol ra yishmor et nafshecha Adonai yishmor zecherecho me'ato v'yad
Achein kol beis Yisrael hanusunim batzoro uvativyo hoimdim bein bayom bein bayabosha Amokai v'rachim mitzoro mirocho mi'afele lo'ei hashto Amen. Mr. Shem, look forward to Mr. Ristovus, Sorot Tovot everywhere, and say everybody should be well as we approach Rosh Chodesh. Rosh Chodesh Nisan.